Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Sueños to Success. I'm Dr. Victor Rios, and today we're diving into a conversation about empowering young people who have been left behind, those who've been disconnected from formal education, pushed to the margins, and made to feel like their voices don't matter. And of course, there's people out there, earth angels, that are helping these young people out. Today, I have the privilege of speaking with two brilliant educators and authors, Jesus Flores and Angel Romeo. They're the authors of this full 7 lessons for burros and bag chasers. We're going to break that down in a little bit and go explore the book a little bit as well. Their work is a testament to the resilience, creativity, and brilliance of young people who often find themselves at the periphery of traditional education systems. Today's episode really is dedicated to the educators, the mentors, the parents of, and just people in the community that care about young people who maybe are not doing well in school, but we're trying to figure out how to make school a responsive environment to them and help them succeed, even though they have faced adversity. We're here to talk about the vision that Jesus and Angel have created, and also some of their incredible concepts. They have this one concept that I absolutely enjoy: philosophy, right? The philosophy of fools. And they'll tell you what a fool is, right? I want them to define fool for me, because a lot of times when we say fool, we think of someone dumb, right? But the way that they've incorporated it is the way that many young people out there in the community incorporated it. And it's about talking about someone in the community that finds creative ways to survive and to thrive. So these individuals, as educators, they have had real life experience growing up in environments of struggle, and now they're working as leaders in education in environments of struggle. So to my listeners, please help me welcome Jesus and Angel. And Jesus, we'll start with you. Tell me a little bit of your journey. What made you want to become a teacher and an education leader from your own growing up?
Yeah, thank you for the introduction. I really appreciate being here. You're a very welcoming person, and to use the word "earth angels," wow, just a little far away from that. But gracias, man. I really appreciate you. My journey as an educator, some of it actually started in community college, I would say. So yes, I went to community college, and I'm a proud community college graduate. I went to East LA College back in 2012. So part of the reason why I ended up at East LA College was because, like, I always had this feeling like I don't want to be a regular fool, right? Now, what does that mean? To me, it was like everybody that's graduating from HP, everyone's going to like Cal State LA or Northridge or what's the other one? Dominguez, right?
And HP is your high school.
Yes, Huntington Park High School, by the way. And by the way, guys, I did end up getting a master's from one of those schools anyway, so you know what I mean? Like, I said that there. But, like, as a kid, right, I'm talking about, this is not what I think today. I'm walking you guys through what I was thinking and experiencing as a kid, right? I wanted to be different. So, for me, it was like, okay, my passion as a high school kid was football, right? If you ever ask me, like, what do you love? I'm like, at least I knew what I loved, right? A lot of times we ask our misguided youth and we say, like, what do you want? What do you love, bro? What do you want to do? And they're like, I don't even know, right? Or maybe they don't trust you enough, right? Which later on we could talk about, like, developing that trust and what does that look like as educators. But so I decided, okay, I'm going to go to East LA College and I want to play football, right? So as I was playing football there, I think a great advantage of being at a community college and playing sports is that you actually get priority registration, priority enrollment, right? Which is one of the biggest challenges, and a lot of the reasons why a lot of people try to push youth not to go to community college often, right? Is that they'll engage with conversations such as like, oh, if you go there, you're gonna be stuck there for the rest of your life. You're never gonna graduate. You're not gonna move on in life, right? So I was lucky enough that while I was there as an athlete, I was able to enroll in all my courses at the right time. Second of all, I was also lucky enough that there you have to take a test, right? I forgot the name of the test, but basically it's a test that tests where you're at, whether you need to take At the time they would call it like remedial English or math in order to actually get
Like
to.
an assessment
Yes,
test
it
to
was an
see
assessment
what
test.
level of English or math you got to be in.
Yes.
Yeah.
So I was at college level, surprisingly, right, in both math and English. So I was able to start at a place where I wasn't starting like a lot of people have to, like, you engage with those courses, so it might take a year or two to even get to base level, right? So I started there, and I remember as I was taking my courses, there was a math class, and I was in there, and I remember, so when you're a student athlete, you're pretty much on campus all day, right, from like 7 in the morning to 7 p.m. That was the grind. That was the grind as a student athlete. And so I was there all day. And so there was this one time I was getting food from the lonchera. And then I went to my math class and I was there like 30 minutes early. And I remember just like standing in front of the class on the whiteboard. And I just felt this level of like, I really see myself doing this,
Mm.
So that was like one of the first times that I really had a personal seed of like, I want to be in education.
So you're looking at the whiteboard and you're thinking, man, I could be up front
Mm-hmm.
writing concepts down
Mm-hmm.
and teaching young people some academics.
Honestly, at that moment, I wasn't even thinking big picture. I wasn't even thinking like thinking critically. I wasn't even thinking about like how can I inspire youth. I was just thinking it feels good to stand here. I've always been a very like feeling oriented person, like where my heart was at, where my
Mm.
feelings were at. That's what I was feeling. And so then by my second year at East LA College, I remember I had this history teacher, and I went to go talk to her after class. And I remember just asking her and being like, hey, like, I think I want to teach history in high school. And she was, I don't remember her name. She was a white woman. And she said, hey, I think that's a great idea. I think someone like yourself will really be able to just connect with
Mm.
kids. They'll look like you talk like them. I think it's a good idea. So that was like part two of that early discovery, right? Being 18 years old and being like, I think I can be an educator, right?
Mm.
So then from there, I transfer over to Briarcliff, where it's
And
Sioux
that's a
City,
university where, bro?
Sioux City, Iowa.
So you go from the hoods of LA,
Yes, sir.
East LA College, still in LA, and you fly all the way to Iowa. I want to hear that story, but before I hear that story, I just want to take a moment and give a shout out to community college professors and community college staff because I feel they're the gateway to success for a lot of individuals that have struggle in their lives and are still wanting to get an education. And a lot of times we don't give them credit because we're thinking of fancy universities,
Mm.
Stanford, Berkeley, going there, the UC system. But the truth is that where the true education happens, the one on one connection is at community colleges. Shout out to community college professors out there, teachers, staff, and the students that are there right now as we speak. I know they're listening because we get a lot of followers from the community college. One of the things that I'm thinking about community colleges have done as groundbreaking is they created this idea of the guided pathway.
Mm.
When you first enter, like through those assessments, they figure out what you want to do, and then they create a pathway for you to get there. One of the things I've done when I'm working with them is I like, hey, I love the pathway. How about you add this little touch to it based on the research? And the little touch I've contributed is I call it the emotionally guided pathway.
Mm.
So as you're creating a pathway for someone, these are the classes you need to take. This is how you're going to transfer to the university you want to go to. Along the way, you're providing a lot of emotional support,
Mm.
whether it's spaces where people can join forces together. They're coming from the same community, the same areas, the same language, the same culture. And in a little bit, I want to ask you too about the importance of cultural connection because just like your professor said at the community college, hey, you kind of look like them, you act like them, you dress like them, you still dress like, you know, some of the young people out there in areas in LA. You're staying culturally connected to them,
Mm.
and that is important, right? Because along the way, you could tell them about your journeys, where you've been, and so I want to hear about having to leave home to Iowa. What was that like?
Yeah. So having to take that leap, it was a real strange experience. And strange because, being raised in an environment where I was lucky enough to have a two-parent household, there is a large dependence, whether you know it or not, on family, right? Whether the family is good at home or not, you still have a family, right? And so when in the summer of 2013, I get a phone call. I'm actually working with Organizing Beyond Barriers, which is basically Unite Here, right? One of the syndicates in LA. And so I'm doing some work there.
What do they do? What do they commit
Yeah,
themselves
so
to?
they commit themselves to organizing around labor rights um, for workers in hotels.
Okay, cool.
And so that was like one of the first elements of my life where I learned about activism, right?
Mm.
But it was funny because, and I'll get to the education right now, but these stories are intertwined. I learned about activism in full praxis rather than like, the typical person that goes into the classroom and then learns about it in a book. I was thrown straight into a picket line. That was my first day of work,
Wow.
right? So there was this strong element of just like people power
Mm.
that I was really inspired and enamored by as I was about to transfer out to Briar Cliffs. So there's a lot of these things kind of simultaneously kind of melting together to kind of build what was my identity as a youth during that time. And so on my way to while I was working, while I was going to organize and protest and do all these different things, I get a phone call from Brian Weller, which is a receivers coach at Briarcliff University, and he's like, "Hey, Mr. Mojarro, one of the coaches at ELAC, send me your film. We like what we're seeing here. We would like to see if we could pay for you to come out and check out the school and visit, right?" So I'm all excited, I'm just like, I'm this little kid, right, with this opportunity of like really fulfilling his dream, which is just to play college football. That's what I've been dreaming about since I was 13 years old,
Mm.
waking up on Saturday mornings and turning on SC games. So I'm like, yeah, I jump on it immediately. That summer I go, I check out the school, and of course they sell me on it.
You been on a plane before this?
Yes, I had
You
gone
been?
to Mexico
What
maybe
about
like
other
once or twice.
states?
I think so. We would travel a lot by car to Mexico, so that means that we would go from LA all the way to Texas. So we would cross state lines, but we wouldn't really like stay,
It's
at
not like you
different
were
states.
flying to Chicago or New York or Iowa growing up.
No, no
Okay,
way.
all right.
Yeah, there's no way. I was doing the typical trajectory to Mexico, which a lot of us often do.
So you
Um,
so what's this like, man? You get on a plane, you get off, and you're like in a new country, really. What was this little homie from
yeah,
HP saying to himself?
yeah. So I experienced for the first time like culture shock.
Uh,
you know and it was so interesting to get to Minneapolis and then from Minneapolis to Omaha, and it was the first time I had only seen white people.
mm,
It was the first time, because like being from HP and that side of LA is pretty much a raza. It's only a raza. So when I'm out there, I'm just like, okay, that's cool. Like I still don't have any negative perceptions or positive perceptions. It's just people,
mm.
right? So I get picked up by the admissions coordinator. He's really kind. Of course, it's a business model. At the time, I'm not really aware of none of those things. I'm just like, yeah, I'm on the trip. Woo! The school's trying to get me a scholarship. So I go and I get sold on it. I'm like, yes, absolutely. I get there and I meet someone. And check out how important this was. I meet this guy named Eddie Ficklin. Eddie Ficklin is a 25-year-old black food from South Central,
Mhm.
you know? And yeah,
Wait, hold on. Let me pause here because I did promise the audience we were going to define full
yeah, yeah,
in your conception because it's important intellectually and in terms of cultural connection to the
yes.
young people in urban America, particularly in Southern California or in California in general. But like, what are we talking about where you're saying full?
Yeah, so the simplest way for me is like just saying friend. Like
Mm,
if I call you a fool, it's a term of endearment.
mm,
It's me like saying like, "What's up, homie? What's up, friend?" And I have this funny story, bro, about this one time, Yolanda used to take care of me as a little kid. She's like a second, third mom. You know, we always had a bunch of moms, you know, in the hood because that's the only way you can really make it, you know, because real moms at work.
Mm-hmm.
so, we would walk around, bro. And since I was young, bro, like 5, 6, 7, I would hear older guys walking around the street point to other people across the street and be like, "Hey, yo, what's up, fool?" You
Okay.
know? And then meanwhile, you know, like women like Yolanda, older ladies, they'd be like, "Mira esos cholos, siempre diciendo cosas malas." You know, like, look at all those gangbangers, blah, blah, blah. You know, so there was this connection, right, with like street culture,
Mm.
right? That even though I was never involved with any gangbanging activities, I think that like whether it's whatever culture is there, like I have a homegirl that used to say we were hood adjacent.
Hood adjacent. Break that down.
It just means that you're like your closeness to all the hood stuff is literally right next door. Your neighbor,
Mm.
you know, your classmate, your best friend, you're someone who you're building real authentic
And
relationships
one of the
with.
things you're doing in the book, you know, you and Angel, you know, what you're doing in the book is you're showing that culture, hood culture,
Mm,
is not always a bad thing.
mm,
Not only is it not always a bad thing, there's a lot of diamonds in hood culture that help us catapult to the next level in life, right? And so I think that's groundbreaking in that a lot of times we try to tell young people if you want to succeed, turn your back on the hood. But really, what you guys are saying is if you want to succeed, bring the diamonds from the hood to the mainstream world and utilize them in a way that's going to allow you to succeed for yourself, for your family, and your community. And so that's why I appreciate when you guys are walking around credentialed. You guys have college degrees, you have teaching credentials, you have administrative credentials. You guys are helping to run schools now, and you're still walking around saying, "Hey, I remember when I met this fool." So let's go back. You met this fool
yeah.
from
So Eddie Ficklin,
okay.
uh, black brother from the hood, and I think that was a really important element for me to connect with, right? Coming back to culture, and even though he's coming from a black culture, I think like Mexican and Central American and black culture in LA these days is a lot more of a sense of togetherness rather than like the 90s or the 80s. Like I wasn't there, right? I could only hear the stories that existed before that, the race riots, et cetera, et cetera. I can say for sure that even though there's still a lot of like anti-blackness, right, in Latino communities, I can't ignore that. But personally, when we connect just people to people, it's a different experience, right? So the school was very strategic in placing me with Eddie Ficklin, right? They're
Mm,
like, he's from LA, he's from LA. They're gonna go ahead and like really link up. And so Eddie Ficklin was someone who was one of the few true friends that I had at Briarcliff. Because while I was in Briarcliff, that dream was quickly shot down,
mm.
just due to just like over racism, and just like a bunch of institutional challenges that I was going to face that I was unaware of.
Mm.
And
Tell me one of those stories because you dropping that, racism word. So like, tell me one of those stories where we could understand like what you felt you were experiencing.
yeah. So two clear examples. There was this guy on the football team that wasn't even an athlete. He was just a recorder, and he was on scholarship too, just to record film. This guy would just obviously, he would always like look at me and say things like, "Hey, if you come and I'm cooking if you come to eat at the cafeteria while I'm cooking, I'm gonna spit in your food."
Mm.
And so his name was, I'm not even gonna say his name, but like that was like a real true experience, right, of what like personal racism looks like, right?
He was a white guy.
He was a white guy. Yeah.
Okay, and you knew he was saying that because you were Mexican.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Wet bag, all those type of things, right?
Mm.
In 2013, right? Not even that long ago. A second experience was while my coaches didn't understand that I was going through mental health crises because I didn't know how to cope with that experience, they would I heard them refer to me once as the lazy Mexican,
Hmm.
which at that point in time I was so enraged and invalidated because they hadn't known all the struggle that I endured at ELAC. They hadn't known all the struggle that I endured, you know, in Huntington Park. They hadn't even cared to know why I was maybe sad. Why was I maybe lethargic? Why, you know what I mean? There was so much going
Mm.
on there.
So you were a little down when you were there.
It was extremely down, you know.
Mm.
That was the first time I ever experienced anxiety. It was the first time I ever experienced like depression. I had this rock. There was this cliff right by my dorm where like daily I'd go and just cry. Just it was just too much. I didn't know how to. I didn't know what it felt like to
Wow.
be an independent person. I didn't know what it was like to go and seek therapy,
Yeah.
you know, and I also didn't know how to make like good friends. It was difficult to actually make friends with people that culturally I was not in alignment with.
Hmm.
I went through like a semester of even like trying to be that culture. It didn't work out.
Be that culture. What do you mean by that?
Trying to be white, you know?
You're trying to blend in,
Yeah, and
assimilate.
assimilate. I tried my best to assimilate, and I remember feeling weird.
Like talk the way you would talk if you were
No,
trying to
no, no,
assimilate.
I don't want to do it. I don't want to do it.
Well, you just trying to be formal, more formal, or like
No, it was the accent, bro. You know,
oh,
like
like
trying
Iowa
to emulate.
accent? Like Iowa
Yeah,
accent.
they say that the Midwest accent is like one of the most clearest English accents in the country.
Oh, so you were just trying to clean up your hood talk.
Yeah, yeah,
Oh,
yeah. And even then, like I remember like listening to myself and being like, "Bro, you sound corny as hell."
wow.
And then also like thinking about Immortal Techniques, like he had a really good song about how like oftentimes like we'll try really hard to fit into their image, and then at the end of the day, we just end up looking like their little monkey in a suit.
Wow, monkey in a suit. That's powerful. Let's talk about that because culture is super important. And so you're not trying to reproduce, as you call it, monkeys in suits, right? Like what you're trying to do is you're trying to bring a new generation of young people up that are from the hood,
Mm.
that grew up in struggle, and to be proud of where they come from while at the same time making a contribution to our country and our world. So thinking about that, you finished at the university there, right?
Yes, I graduated from that school.
What made you build that strength to stay? Because you could have flown back home
Yeah.
to mom and dad, and maybe they would have, let you stay for a little bit, and you got a job, and then helped out at home. But you decided to stay. What was it about your cultural foundation that gave you
Mm.
the strength to stay?
Yeah, I contemplated deeply dropping out. Right,
Mm.
I contemplated deeply one day just leaving that school and never coming back. That's what I wanted to do for days. I remember I would look at the calendar and I would be like, "Yo, I have 90 days left this semester. That is wild. I'm never
Mm.
gonna make it."
Mm.
Right, but I think that there was an element of believing in something bigger than me. One thing was I would think about my little sister a lot.
Mm.
And I would think about how we were close before I left and how much she loved me. And I would always look at, like, I would think about her little face and I'd be like, I have to be the first one in my family to graduate, because that's going to inspire her to not settle for just high school graduation.
So being that role model for your little
Yeah.
sister.
Yeah.
Mm.
And then on top of that, I also had a lot of underclassmen from my own high school that looked up to me because I was one of the few guys that got to go and play college football, right? So sister, community, old college football teammates from high school, like looking up to me and being like, I know that I can't come back home empty-handed,
Mm.
right? And of course, my family, my mom and dad being people who imperfectly sacrificed so much, right? Just to make sure that I even was able to get there, right? Like an
Mm.
airplane ticket to get to Sioux City, that's a lot of money.
So your family paid for that.
After the trip, the
Yeah,
first
yeah,
trip
yeah.
was covered because they want to get you there.
Yeah.
But after that, if you want to go there, you got to figure
Holiday,
it on your own.
Thanksgiving,
Bro, on holidays, I
Christmas.
would have to stay at school for
Mm.
Thanksgiving. I would stay at school when nobody else was there.
What would you cook, bro?
Man, uh, those dollar meals, bro, from McDonald's.
On Thanksgiving?
No, Thanksgiving, bro. I was lucky enough to find other students on campus, and uh, whether you're racist or not, during that holiday, everyone's cool as hell. You know what I mean?
Okay, everyone's close
So,
together.
that's what happened during those times. So just thinking about my family, I think was always definitely community and family was something that I was always like, I need to ensure that no matter what happens, I don't come back home and never and not being a
Home
quitter.
empty-handed.
Yes, sir. So, and another component was like, I'm not a quitter.
Mm.
I'm stubborn. Being a burro, being a burro for the worst things sometimes. There's still like a silver lining. On the
Let's
other
go.
side of that.
Let's go. So we talked about fool. In a little bit, we'll talk about philosophy with Angel. But break down burro. That not just translate it, but like, what does it mean? Because burro is another concept y'all utilize. Y'all flip it on its head.
Mm. Yeah. So um when you're a kid and you're not meeting expectations, you're often called a burro, right? Which basically signifies that you're being stubbornly dumb, right? And that you need to do something else. So if you notice, the burro's ears are really big, and you get your ears pulled a couple times, right? So being a burro is being someone who is really struggling, which is not even fair to a donkey because donkeys are apparently pretty smart creatures.
Mhm.
But whatever, for whatever reason, right? The cultura decided to go ahead and coin burro as that person who's struggling to get a concept, who's being stubborn, who's just not learning,
Mm.
right? And so that's how we utilize the word burro.
Burro. Yeah. Growing up, man, my mom, called me. She was on the podcast, so my listeners know that like we struggled, right, and that she didn't really know how to kind of raise kids, right? Because she came from the streets too, and that experience. But she would call us every single word you can. Call someone dumb,
Mm.
burro, idiota, pendejo, stupid, baboso, inútil. I mean, I feel like in Spanish, there's 1,000 ways to call someone dumb.
Mm.
And then there's like different evolutions of dumb. Like you could be a menso, or you could be a mensote or a mensito, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
different evolutions of dumb, like Pokemon.
yeah.
So growing up that way, man, a lot of times we feel like, oh, I must be dumb if people are calling me dumb, right? And so what I love about your concept of flipping the burro around is that, hey, maybe you grew up with people telling you you're supposed to be dumb, but know that that in itself, right, is a logic that you can break and you could use that to your advantage as you enter the professional world. So going back to the conversation of thinking of negative ideas
Mm.
like fool and burro and tying them to our work with individuals that are facing a lot of adversity out there in the world. I'm thinking about, what it means to be culturally responsive, right? To know how to talk to people in the way that they've been brought up rather than trying to force people to assimilate, force
Mm.
people to, know how to talk in a professional way the minute that you meet them, right? You got to meet them where they're at, is what I'm saying. And so there's a lot of research out there. There's a very classic study in the American Educational Research Journal by Gloria Latson Billings that introduced the concept of culturally relevant pedagogy, teaching in a culturally relevant way. And so she talks about a theory of culturally relevant pedagogy, which demonstrates that when educators use students' cultural experiences, where they're coming from,
Mm.
language, histories, as tools for learning, student engagement and achievement improve by 25 to 30%. So the research shows it, folks. When we know how to talk to our students in a way that they can relate to, their academics go up, they improve. She found that culturally relevant teaching helps young people feel seen and valued within the educational process, boosting their academic performance and self esteem by over 40%. So, you know how I talked about sometimes being called dumb a little too much or being told you're a fool, thinking like you're not going to make it. But if we got educators saying, hey, listen, you are going to make it, use the tools you've been learning in your community, that self esteem gets pushed up. So I wanted to go back to your own journey because at some point you're detached from your culture in Iowa, but you still make it because of your culture. You come back, and then what's that journey to say, hey, I'm really committed to being an educator.
Yeah. La cultura cura, right?
Mm,
Culture heals.
mm,
And I think it's when you're able to utilize that power, right, to get a kid from not being able to read to being able to read is by utilizing their asset, right?
mm.
And their asset can be based on what they know.
Yeah.
And if what they know is their culture, then you utilize that as a stepping stone, right? In education, we say as a scaffold to then begin to have interest,
Mm,
right? Now you're a child whose curiosity has been sparked. And with that spark comes enlightenment,
mm,
right? And once you can see, you no longer can unsee, right?
mm,
And so that I think that's the point, right, of being a culturally responsive educator. And part and parcel of the reason why I decided to become a teacher, right? To be able to, my dream after college football was to become a teacher in the hood,
mm,
right? And part of that was because I already had now I had a real activist mindset. Now my mindset was like, how do I make a difference in my community, right? And the way I do that is by coming back and teaching kids how to think critically through literature,
mm,
right? Whether it was in the English classroom, whether it was in a history classroom, whether it was in ethnic studies, that was, I mean, we had the standards, right? But my real standard and objective was to make sure that kids were thinking in the classroom, right? And while I was doing that, I knew that that was my mission that kids could actually connect to, right? And that's just so being culturally responsive in that classroom looked like finding what type of music they were into, right? And then crafting lessons that somehow still connected to that. It was finding what they were into in the neighborhood, right? It was finding what type of shows they were into. So, like, culturally responsive is not just being Mexican or black, it's really getting to know their culture, right? Because every generation of students has now a new culture, right? And such cultures that kind of sometimes are assimilating and sometimes are kind of converging on new ones. And it's a beautiful thing working in education because you get to see the evolution of really society in the
yeah.
country. So we get to be the hood sociologists,
Mm,
we get to
mm,
be the sociologists on the ground where we're like, okay, this idea, let me go ahead and try this.
mm,
And I think culturally responsive teaching has definitely been one that has paid dividends, right? When me and Angel were co-teaching together, me and Angel many years ago got to co-teach a
that's
class together
awesome.
where one time I decided to go bust a mission to Luis J. Rodriguez's bookstore, the Achuchas, in Silmar. And I was looking for culturally responsive literature, and one of the books that I found was um, the Tao Wu by the RZA,
Mm,
right? Where one of the first bars in that book is him talking about him being from the projects,
mm,
right? And the way that my kids in Watts from the projects read that, and I saw their eyes open,
mm.
right? With the same kids that everyone's saying, oh, they don't like to read, oh, they don't like to open up books, oh, da la la la, they're not engaged, right? They were engaged.
Wow. That's powerful. That's power. That's like full circle, right? You went from disengaged, like not knowing how to, you know, connect with this culture in the university you were at, to all of a sudden making sure that you knew your students were always connected to some culture that they can relate to. That's incredible, Jesus. Well, hey, appreciate you being here and taking the time. Uh, Really amazing, and in a little bit here, I'll be able to hear from Angel too about the process of writing the book this full. But I appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, yeah,
Appreciate
yeah.
you.
I'd like to take this time to introduce you to my book, Street Life, Poverty, Gangs, and a PhD. Check it out. It's on Amazon. It has my own journey and some helpful advice on how to overcome adversity. All right, Angel. So now I want to ask you. I know I've had a great, conversation, learning a little bit about the idea of fool, the idea of burro, the idea of bringing culture into education for young people that are coming from adverse environments. And so I wanted to ask you, what does it mean to you to have developed this idea of philosophy? And if you don't mind breaking down what y'all mean by philosophy.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we talk about philosophy or a philosopher, it's a play on words, right? So we have fool and then philosopher, but really what we're talking about is the unconventional wisdom that our people from communities of struggle have that is often overlooked or ignored, which is also connected to culturally responsive teaching and literature. So to be a philosopher means to be a deep thinker, right? Where most people would ignore that knowledge that you have. A critically engaged and intuitive teacher is like, nah, this kid, Victor Rios, he's got some knowledge. He's got some incredible wisdom that we can tap into. So really what a philosopher does is a philosopher is not just streetwise, but they're an astute, tactful hustler that understands the situation.
Mm, an astute individual that understands the situation. I feel like growing up on the streets, when you're having to fend for yourself,
Hmm.
you you know how to shapeshift. You know how to make a dollar out of 15 cents. You know how to, find that next meal. You know how to, find, you know, uh, housing for people that are unhoused. Like I remember, as a teenager, we go and get cars and a lot of times, some the reason we went and got cars was we had this friend that his parents had kicked him out of uh, the house, and he had no place to sleep. So we get a car, and he get to sleep in the back seat. Eventually we get in trouble for it. But I guess what I'm saying is that a lot of times you know how to use your environment. Sometimes you have to create, get involved in crimes of survival to get through that day. But you're trying to avoid that for this generation of young people. Like, you don't have to get involved in crimes of survival. We'll find your resources. We'll find a way. So tell me a little bit about your own experience, your own kind of journey and growing up in, you know, communities of struggle, and how that led you to want to be an educator.
Yeah, absolutely. So, excuse me, a little bit about my background is I was born in El Salvador in a city called San Miguel in a small country. And I came to the United States at the age of 7. And I grew up in different parts of Los Angeles. Family life was, I would say, had all my basic needs met from a working class standpoint, but definitely a lot of dysfunctionality. And so my journey and my introduction to trauma just came early on, just with witnessing a lot of the violence happening in my neighborhood. At the age of 5, I had already seen like 2 people dead in the street, and not really understanding that, and not really knowing how to cope with that. So sort of just like, this is just another day, right, in El Salvador. And then coming to the United States and Los Angeles, and dealing with the politics of growing up in poor neighborhoods in and around Los Angeles and LA County really is what compelled me to think about trauma, and more importantly, to think about the role of trauma in schools. So I'm kind of glossing through a lot here, but I entered education really with the understanding that many of the young people we serve in urban schools have gone through much trauma. Their ACEs scores are very high. And so it
Tell
is
us, break down the ACE. What does that mean?
so ACE stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences, and there's a quiz that you can take. Just Google ACEs inventory or quiz, and it just asks you a set of questions about what types of trauma you have experienced. And what the research shows is that the higher the score, essentially, the more challenges this individual may have just coping with basic things, right? Like focusing in school, engaging in having healthy relationships, and so on. And ultimately, your life outcomes are more complicated. And for some individuals, we also know, and I'm almost certain the research tells us this, but you can confirm that your life is shortened the higher your ACEs score, your lifespan, right?
Yeah. So the more adversities you face as a child, like not having a one parent at home or not having any parents at all, being a foster kid or being poor, those ACEs end up affecting you in the long run. But there is hope.
There is hope.
And the hope is earth angels like yourselves that are out there providing resilience and life lessons to young people that have faced these ACEs. And then these are tools for healing so then they can heal themselves, their families, and their communities. So you go through all this struggle. You're seeing dead bodies as a child. You're going through a lot. And you're like, man, I want to come back because I know what an ACE feels like.
Mhm.
And now I'm going to intervene in the lives of young people going through these ACEs today. So tell me a little bit about that, kind of like why a teacher, right? Because sometimes we go through school, we don't get along with our teachers. We leave school feeling like, man, school's not a cool environment. Teachers don't like people like me. But y'all are changing that narrative because y'all are the cool teachers that I would have liked to have growing up. So what was it that was like teaching is important for me because it's going to allow me to do this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I had incredible people along my journey that cared about me as a human being, particularly educators. So I met some of the most wonderful educators I'd ever encountered at Cal State Northridge, in the English department, in the ethnic studies departments, and they really nurtured me into embracing my inner nerd, what I called the ghetto nerd, right? I was allowed to be a ghetto nerd, right? And in fact, it was in one of these departments that I discovered your book, Street Life,
Mhm.
right? And so this is maybe a full circle moment, you could say, because at that time I did not know you, but in the process of applying to graduate school at New York University, I connected with a professor by the name of Dr. Arlene Davila, and I explained to her what my research was, and I wanted to study skaters from the hood. And for me, the hood has always been important, right? It's like, I want to study the hood. Like, I want to be in my community. I want to study my people, right? And she's like, you know what? There's this young sociologist. He's at UC Santa Barbara. Check him out. She doesn't speak like that, by the way, but she's a very successful professor, right? Shout out Dr. Arlene Davila. And she put me on your book, Punished. She was like, read his book, scour his resources. Like it's gonna serve your theoretical framework when you write your dissertation proposal. Because the idea was for me to become a cultural anthropologist or a sociologist, and you conducted a very thorough ethnographic research study, right, of youth at Promise Youth in Oakland, and so that really inspired me.
Mm.
Like a teacher, not only cared about me, but spoke my language, showed me culturally responsive literature. They gave me guidance. They gave me a pathway, a direction where I did not see one. You
Mm.
can't be what you can't see, right?
Mm.
And so when I was taking many of my
Boy,
classes
I
in
want
college,
to pause there real quick.
yeah,
Can't be what you can't see. So if I want to be a lawyer
mm-hmm,
from the hood,
mm-hmm.
for the hood, but I can't see lawyers from the hood, for the hood around me,
Mm-hmm.
how can I be that? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, you need exposure, right? Exposure matters, right? So nothing happens by coincidence, right? Like I'm not like you didn't pick up a random guy off the street today to be on this podcast, right? You're a highly educated individual, professor, multi-published author who has a strong network and who has a particular set of values, right? And we're aligned on those values, and we connected, and you invited me because through divine intervention, right? An act of God's grace, but also we're connected because we're in the same work, we're in the same field.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's this perception, and I think as educators who are conscious and caring, we need to demystify this idea of like hard work will get you anywhere. You talk about this in your book. It's not just hard work, homie, right? It's not just hard work. We know millions of people that work hard every single day, 50, 60 hours a week, and they are just getting by. So you need actually more than hard work, right? You need smart work. You need strategic work, right? And that's where you need your mentors. So when I'm in college thinking about I want to be a professor, that seems so cool. They're teaching all these amazing concepts. They're working with young people. That really excited. Like the idea excited me. I'm a very aspirational individual. That idea excited me. So when Arlene Davila showed me your book, that was it for me. I was like, I want to be that guy. I don't know who he is. I don't know anything about him. And at the time, you were starting to take off. Like you're not like this academic giant that you are now, right? And he is the GOAT. He's still my GOAT.
Thank you, brother.
Yeah. And at the time, I think you were a young professor. Right? It was like 2012, 2011. I'm sure. I mean, you're still on the grind, but I'm sure that's a world away from 2025, right? And I remember like you showed me a pathway. I was like, he studied like his community, he studied his people, he's from the struggle. And that changed my perception of what a professor looks like.
So thinking about representation, we're talking about representation here, right? We're talking about culture and representation today and why it matters. Our young people out there in the community, communities of struggle, right? They're not seeing a lot of role modeling that's positive. And with us professionals out there trying to do positive things and be positive role models, sometimes what we encounter is a pushback. And the pushback is like, why do we need to make room for these young people in our institutions, right? Whether it's work or universities. Why do we need to make room for them if they haven't earned a spot, right? And so I think it's very important to think about the ways in which individuals like yourself, like Jesus, have carved out a path for these young people to know, even though some of these institutions might message to you, you don't belong here, we're here to let you know you do belong here. And that's important. So now I'm thinking about the way in which you decided it's time for me and my boy Jesus to write a book. So I want you to tell me a little bit about the messaging in the book. Maybe break down one of the lessons you got in there for young people. It is not just a profound book, but a funny book. And you got to be funny to connect, right? That's the cultural piece too.
Yep.
So also tell me a little bit about why y'all decided to use humor and even come up with a character. He's a burro, he's a donkey, churro, the burro. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we're foods. And if you're not having fun, then you're not really a food, And I think that's very important. That's why I'm wearing my Buzz Lightyear socks, right? I always tell the students, right, I'm dressed in my future aspiring superintendent outfit. But I tell the students, don't let the church shoes fool you, right? Because the students were like, hey, you got the church shoes on, mister, right? The students like to crack jokes. And that's part of growing up in the hood, right? It's not malicious. It's just part of, you got to survive.
Yeah, and to the listeners, Angel's wearing these really nice brown dress shoes. He's got some nice blue dress pants. He's got a blue tie on, a white shirt. He's looking impeccable. And he always tells the kids, right, don't let the shoes fool you. What do you mean by that, though? Because some people think that what we're doing is selling out. Like, hey, you sold out. You're a professor at a big university. You sold out. You're getting your doctorate at USC now. You dressing like a preacher or something. Like you sold out, right? So like, what do you say, man?
I say what we're doing is breaking generational curses that say you can't own a pair of Jordan 4s and also some Cole Haans or a nice suit. I say what we're doing is we're building generational wealth for our families. We're making money. We're buying homes. We're building our 401ks. We're educating young people in the inner cities, and we're showing them that you can be educated and come from the hood. That's what we're doing.
And still help the hood too.
And
while
still
you're
help
at
the
it.
hood. You can help your family, you can help yourself, and you can help your community. And we do that every day. I work in South Central, and every Friday, right? I'll pull out my Air Maxes, I'll pull out my Jordan 4s, but Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I'm all dressed up. I'm
Why?
creased up because I want them to see that you can be that.
Mm.
You can be that person that wears a dress shirt, that knows how to put on a tie, that puts on some dress shoes, and you can also pull out your Supreme sweater or your Pro Club hoodie. That's okay. You can be both, but don't be a one-dimensional food. Don't be a one-trick pony like we say in America, right? Because one-trick ponies, they just know one trick. You're gonna be in that corner at the show.
Don't be a one-trick burro.
Don't be a one-trick burro. Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, well,
This Food 2.0 coming soon.
we're already shapeshifters.
Correct.
We already know how to survive.
Correct.
And then what you're doing is teaching young people how to thrive.
How to thrive. And it's bigger than code switching. It's life switching.
Break that down.
So we talk about code switching from a linguistic standpoint, right? Of saying, hey, you're in a formal environment. You may not want to use that particular set of words. And it's an important skill to teach young people. And what we're teaching in this food, that it's bigger than just, oh, just switch the way you speak, switch the way you dress. We're like, nah, switch the way you think. We're not code switching. We're switching the program. We're switching the code. We're changing the whole program. We're rewriting the matrix. That's what we're doing here. And so we understand that because you really started it, right? Writers like yourself, writers like Victor Villaseñor, right? Writers like Luis J. Rodriguez, y'all were trailblazers, right? Just really doing this really on an island. So we're really carrying that legacy, and we want to normalize that for the young students, and not just at Promise student, like all students. Hey, don't be afraid of that kid. That kid's not trying to hurt you. You may not understand how they move and how they speak, but if you engage with them with these tools that are human tools, humanizing, they'll respond the same way that Miss Russ reached into your soul, right? You responded because she didn't see a banged out fool. She saw a young man that was hurting, that was going through some deep trauma, and she reached into your soul, right? A couple decades later, here you are thriving. And that's the magic of humanizing connection. That's the magic of storytelling. That's the magic of just really caring. Like you don't need a college degree. You don't need a PhD to care.
You don't need a PhD to care, but so many times we have PhDs, all kind teaching degrees, and we still don't know how to care. There's a little research here. In 2017, there's the evidence base for how we learn, supportive students, social, emotional, and academic development. And in this piece, the authors emphasize the importance of integrating social and emotional learning with culturally responsive approaches, something we've been talking about. Their findings showed that when you provide emotional, supportive work combined with culturally affirming practices, hey, you come from there, you talk like this, all good. We're going to teach you how to talk in the mainstream world, how to be proud of where you come from and switch whenever you want, and that mind shift whenever you want. It results in higher academic achievement, up to 25% improvement, improved mental health by 35%, and greater overall well-being for underserved young people by 40%. So imagine if someone asked you, if you wanted to improve the well-being of young people struggling, would you do it? Yes. Okay, then invest in that social emotional work. And then there's another book published in 2017 by Django Paris and Sami Alim, and the culturally sustaining pedagogies are so important. So again, we got to sustain the culture while teaching young people how to make it in this conventional world, right? And there's no need to choose one or the other. We can be both and not either or. Going back to your book, and maybe if you could animate uh, Churro the Burro for us. Churro the Burro, for me, man, I think there should be a movie, animated film about him.
Pixar,
Yes.
call me.
I think there should be, uh, a comic book about Churro the Burro. And man, if you ever buy the mascot suit, I'll wear it on your behalf at a book signing. But tell us, animate Churro the Burro. What does he represent?
Churro the Burro represents all of us. He represents that kid that is a dreamer, that kid that grew up in a family of struggle, that kid that's a deep thinker, that cares, and may have been a little misguided on their journey, may have caught a few more scars than most in their trajectory of life. They represent that person that needs an extra hug, that
Mm,
person that needs that extra affirmation, that person that needs a meaningful curriculum in the classroom. They represent that that timeless spirit, that person that's willing to do whatever it takes to take care of their family.
mm,
They're that kid in your classroom that you just don't quite understand, but that one day when you just gave him that granola bar, right? And you're like, oh, he was just hungry.
mm,
Got it. When you humanize them, right? They represent that person that grew up on the struggle and they just want to do right by their family. They want to do good in life and they just don't quite know how.
mm,
And they've taken many, many losses in their life, sometimes tragic losses,
mm,
but they'll put on the tie if you show them how. They'll put on that tie if you teach them how.
mm.
They'll perform. They just want an opportunity. They want a chance, and they'll work harder than anyone you have ever worked with.
That the rewarding part of your job right now, like working with young people when you see they prove you right. So
Mm-hmm.
you've been telling other people this kid's gonna respond. I don't see it, Mr. Angel. I don't
Mm-hmm.
see it. This kid will respond. I don't see it. And a
Right.
few months later, the kid puts on the tie, or the kid applies for a job, or the kid gets that grade to pass that class.
Correct. Correct. And it takes patience. Oftentimes we want young people, or let's be real, we want people in general to grow at the rate in which we believe they should grow. But that's not reality, right? People are on their own timeline. It's our job, like you say very, very aptly in your TED talk, that young people are like oysters, right? And they open up and then they close up. And you just have to be ready right when they're ready. And that's why it's so critically important that, especially if you serve in a community that has a lot of trauma and struggle, that you equip yourself with the SEL tools, with the culturally responsive curriculum, and with the people skills to engage with young people who may come with additional challenges into the
Mm.
classroom.
Nowadays, people make SEL political things like, oh, SEL, that means you're teaching kids, but, uh, mushy stuff that like they should be learning academics, but
Mm,
you're over here trying to be their therapist. Like, what do you
mm,
have to say to that
mm.
argument?
How's that going for you?
Mm,
How is you ignoring a student's mental health, a student's emotional state going for you?
mm,
That's what I would say.
yeah. I mean, just across the board, right? We see in the research, right, that you invest in the check-in. You invest
Mm-hmm.
in the how's your soul today. You
Mm-hmm.
invest in the rose and a thorn. What's something a rose was something good that's happened to you this week? What's a
Mm-hmm.
thorn was something bad? Okay, now I know you. Now we're grounded. Now let's go learn the
Mm-hmm.
math I have to teach you. That especially for young people, as you said earlier, that encounter ACEs, that's their way of starting that healing process, and then also being ready to learn the
Mm-hmm.
academic piece. So that's crucial.
Yeah, and you make a safer environment not just for the students but for everyone at the school.
Mm.
Have you ever met someone who is extremely dysregulated and try working with them?
All day long, man. all day. I mean, I got a few professors I work with that are dysregulated.
right? And how difficult is it to just get anything done when someone is dysregulated,
Hmm.
right? Now imagine a classroom, right, of even a handful of students who are dysregulated, right? You're not going to be able to teach, and you're not teaching because you are fundamentally a bad teacher. You're not teaching because you're ignoring the needs in that room. And I think in in many communities, there's this mindset that I'm here to teach the content. I'm not here to worry about these other problems. That's for the counselor, right?
Hmm.
But if the counselor ratio is 200 to 1 or 400 to 1, then no, you are the counselor. And in fact, parents, our communities, our parents are trusting you, right? The state and the federal government is saying, hey, we're going to pay you this salary for you to come here. And I understand as a teacher, now an administrator, teachers don't make much. But you know what? Your work is so important. And that connection is so important. So for me, you don't have to choose between being the caring teacher and the content expert. Be both. Be
Mm.
better than a caring teacher and a content expert. Be the caring teacher, content expert, counselor, social worker that really connects with the students,
Mm.
right?
Yeah.
That's my position. Now that's a very subjective position. Maybe some people might disagree, but let's talk about it. But let's not talk about it so long that young people are losing an interest in education, that they're losing an interest in caring for their peer. Your classroom is a microcosm of society. You can teach a young dysregulated person like a young Victor Rios how to just have a regular conversation
Mm.
about their feelings in a 5-minute exchange. You don't have to carve into your entire curriculum, and you just taught them a little tool, a little strategy. And in 180 days, if I teach you one small social emotional regulation or self-regulation skill, self-efficacy, executive functioning, just small skills, you will have learned 180 skills by the end of the year.
Mm.
You're better prepared to take on life after that.
That's a good title for another book. 180 skills, right, in a school year,
Yeah.
right? Let me ask you about the hood nerd idea
Hmm.
because I wasn't a hood nerd because my environment didn't allow me to be that hood nerd. I think I would have been if I had like the right kind of context. But in many ways, you are at heart a hood nerd. You've always been proud of it. What advice do you have for those? There are little kids out there that are hood nerds right now listening. They're the ones that the teacher's like, hey, I got this podcast that you should listen to. It's Victor Rios. It's great network. It's these guys that wrote a book that's full. You should listen to it, and they're listening to it right now, and they're like, man, these teachers, they're talking, they're talking my language. They're talking my story. What advice do you have for them?
For hood nerds, I would say, hey, keep learning. I would say keep having fun, continue to explore ideas, think deeply, continue caring about your community. There's a lot of pride and self actualization and joy in embracing who you really are and continuing to learn. I would say you're awesome. You're great. You will get very far in life. Think about your family. Think about how it's bigger than you. Um, keep hustling.
Hey, thank you, Angel. Thank you.
Yes.
Jesus and Angel, I appreciate both of you joining me today and sharing your powerful insights on empowering young people who have been left behind. Your work, seen through this full 7 lessons for burros and bag chasers, is a testament to the brilliance, resilience, and creativity of young people who are often dismissed or underestimated. To my audience, please go pick up this book. You can find it on Amazon. What you've described today through concepts like churro de burro, philosophy, and just teaching us what it means, right? What it means to be an educator, a mentor, or even a parent that understands the culture that our kids are coming from. It's crucial knowledge that you brought today. You speak directly to the research we discuss as well. And it's about taking the authentic lived experiences of young people and transforming them into sources of empowerment, validation, and success. You're showing the world that the youth who've been pushed to the margins aren't lacking in brilliance. They're simply operating outside of systems that were never designed to see their value. And now you're teaching them, like, hey, you could be both. You could be valued in this system, but also hold the value of your community and culture with you. And through your work, you're not only acknowledging the brilliance, you're amplifying it, celebrating it, and using it as a tool for liberation. And this is crucial because poverty can be unliberating. You talked about breaking those chains, right? By teaching people that they could be successful, they can operate in this mainstream world and be proud of where they come from. So before we wrap up, I want to give each of you a moment to share any final thoughts or advice you like to offer to our listeners, particularly those who find themselves in places of struggle.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say if you're finding yourself in a place of struggle, whether you're a young person or an adult even, I would say it's okay to reinvent yourself. It's okay to feel your pain and heal from your pain. I would just say I would caution you from doing that in isolation. So healing is a community process. So you don't have to heal alone. You don't have to cry alone. There's a powerful community of educators like the ones here. There are communities everywhere. There is help. There is hope. So heal, empower yourself, and remember that the young people are waiting for educators to care. So their success is our success.
Be resilient, persevere, y échale muchas ganas. With those three things, you will have a perfect concoction to be successful, especially when you come from struggle. With resilient, you'll be like a stone and weather any storm. With perseverance, no matter what challenge comes your way, you will be able to advance past any obstacle. And con ganas, that's that ingredient that not everyone has. With ganas, which is essentially willpower, it's that thing that will connect you to whether it's your family or whether you believe in a metaphysical thing such as God, the universe, etc. Ganas is that one thing that nobody could take from you. So as long as you have ganas, you're going to be able to get through anything. That's what I have to say to the youth.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you.